O tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi nui ka koutou. Before we start, I'll just hand it over to Enon Delamere. Kia ora, Enon.
Tēnā tātou te whānau, tēnā tātou e whakarau I ka nei. Ana I raro I te ipurangi, I raro I te whakaro o te kaupapa. Kia whakarewa nei tō tātou kaupapa I roto I te reo karakia. Anō reira, manawa mai te mauri nuku, manawa mai te mauri rangi, te mauri I ka whakapaki, te mauri I ka whakakake. Te mauri o te tihiri, o te whakaro, te mauri o te hiri, o te wairua. Te mauri ki runga, te mauri ki raro, te mauri ka aputi ki te whaiau, ki te ao mārama. Ohi, wero, tawana mai te mauri, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Oh, no mai hara mai, and welcome to our panel of Te Hīhiri and the Spark for Change. Before we kick off, we're just going to introduce ourselves individually, so we're just going to go through that. And just reminding everyone, we're doing a 60-minute kōrero conversation, learning from each other and with each other. And please feel free, if you have any questions, to share your questions. And our techies will do the best to put them up for us so we can go through them, have a look at them and be able to respond. So before we get in any further, ko te atiawa ki Taranaki ahau, ko County Cork ahau, ko Huia O'Sullivan tōku ingoa. I'm the cleaner, the driver, the sandwich maker for Ngā Rangatahi Toa, and I guess our biggest advocate in terms of working with rangatahi, with South Auckland, West and North, through the creative arts to find a better place for our rangatahi with creative youth development and building their resilience. I'll hand it over to you, Tama. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, no Ingarani, no Airani, no Kotarani, hoki oku tīpuna, ko Ngāti te iwi, ko Jarman, ko Hunter, ko Dent, ko Shapti, ko Macallion tuku whānau, no Tautahi tuku pāpa, no Whakatani tuku māma, no whangarei ahau, Ingarai kei Tamaki Makaurau taku kāinga, ina nei, ko Tama tuku ingoa. Kia ora everyone, my name's Tama. I'm an English-Irish Scottish Pākehā from Whangarei. And I am an artist. I'm a performing artist. I live in Auckland and working as a performing artist, but I also have the privilege of working for Ngā Rangatahi Toa as a kaiawhina support worker and an artist mentor when the time suits. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Kylie.
Kia ora tātou. No Ingarani, me Airani, me Haimani o ka tipuna. E te pia ki o ki Tāmaki Makaurau, I noho ana o ki Sandringham. I mahi ana aho ki Te Taumata Toia Iwi, ko Kylie Seeley tōku ingoa. Kia ora, I'm Kylie. I whakapapa to England, Ireland and Germany. I'm here today in my role with Te Taumata Toia Iwi. So we work in the creative sector in Tāmaki in the advocacy and capability space. So I'm looking forward to the conversation ahead. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Enon Delamere tōku ingoa. Ko ari ki te maunga ko Waipapa te awa ko Ngāti Paia Kautahapu. Ko te whānau apanui te iwi te taho o tāku koraua. Ana ngō kaitahu anō hoki tēnei tangata. Anō hoki te arawa waka. Me whakatohia e mihi kaua tēnei kia koutou. Kia ora everyone, Enon Delamere. Enon is Welsh and Delamere is French. But I hail from what we call Te Pito o Te Motu, which I guess loosely translated as the centre of the universe. And it's a little place called Whitianga Bay, and that's in the heartlands of Te Whānau Apanui. My mahi really is to support Māori artists and the Māori art sector in Tāmaki, and I work with Kylie in Te Taumata Toia Iwi, but I also work for the Auckland Arts Festival, and for my sins, I guess, I work out at Hoani Waititi Marae, and I'm like Huia, make the sandwiches and clean the toilets and make sure the marae ticks over. So kia ora.
Kia ora. I also just want to mihi to our New Zealand Sign Language kaimahi whānau there, Tania, who's signing away for us. Ngā mihi e hoa. Lovely to have you with us, with part of our whānau. Before we get underway, I guess we just want to, when I was curating this panel, and I call it a curation because we wanted to be really intentional about those of us that are Māori, but also those of us that aren't Māori, but are also really committed to working in a way of te ao Māori. And who we work along very, very deeply. So the makeup of the panel that you see in front of you is over many conversations of trusted relationships and a shared value system that we all share. I just want to give you a bit of an overview for some of you that so have an understanding of the context of what I will be speaking to on this and our journey within Ngā Rangatahi Toa. So I took over as the executive director for Ngā Rangatahi Toa maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Before that was, many of you might know Sarah Longbottom, who's a lovely woman, Pākehā, very tall, very charismatic, and in her own right, who a very strong wahine. We'd kind of gotten to a point where she had started to recognise that the face of Aotearoa and the creative arts was shifting and needing to create space for Māori, given what we were delivering in terms of our priority populations. Our makeup of our rangatahi is 100% either of Māori or Pasifika descent. Now, that's not saying that's what we particularly go and look for. That is the nature of what young people are attracted to our program and the reason why. Some people will call us a kaupapa Māori. I would never call us that. We work in a framework of te ao Māori. And for me, part of that is about making sure that whatever we're doing sits within the values of te ao Māori. The makeup of our board, we went through massive changes, you know, and I said to our board, I don't know if we should keep the name Ngā Rangatahi Toa. Part of the reason for that was I didn't feel as a Māori wahine that we were being true to that name or we were being tika. And I wanted us to do whatever we done, that we done it really well. So there were some massive conversations held at a board level to whether we keep our name, Ngā Rangatahi Toa, and fully step into that, or whether we change it to an English name and just roll with that, and that's fine. And part of that was then it took away an expectation that if you were carrying a Māori name, then you live that and you breathe it in totality of that. And I wanted to ensure that we're doing that because for me, if we're not getting our name right, then how are we getting it right for our rangatahi? And we can't be expected to pronounce their names right if no one can even pronounce our name right. So while there's still some of our branding that sits in the NRT, for me, it was about to whakamana the name, and Kylie would be able to talk to this also within Te Toi Matatoia Iwi. But it was about to ensure that we are there to whakamana the name in order to whakamana our rangatahi that we are working so closely with and their whānau. So that's just to give you a bit of a context of, you know, understanding the changing space that we were moving in within the arts sector, and Sarah wanting to start to make some shifts around that too and creating space of what was more appropriate. So now we sit in the space where we are Māori led by myself, and I work through a number of core kaimahi, which is, we call them ahika. Ahika refers to the people that keep the home fires burning, and then we bring in contractors like Tama and a whole lot of other artists and youth development workers to work alongside our babies. So that's just to give you context around that. And for us, it was, sometimes I'll sit down with people to interview them, and they might be Pākehā or they might be iwi takitaki, so they might be Hawaiian or Irish, and them understanding too of how they come to the work of going, I don't think I could work for you because I'm not Māori. And it's understanding that, but how you come to the work, there's a couple of things you understand, is that you understand suffering of what it looks like to look like a minority people. And so for our Irish whānau that work with us, they understand what that looks like in their own country. Same with the Hawaiian kaimahi that we have working for us, and that we bring that into our mahi. And it's not saying that's where we work from, because we never work from a deficit focus around we're victims, or we understand the impacts of colonisation. But what we understand is how we can be better partners and how we can be better treaty partners to ensure that what our rangatahi feel, hear, breathe, eat, sleep is te ao Māori, and it's a journey, and that we're all on that journey together, and we're all at different starting points. So I guess within that, and that's why, you know, if you have questions, please ask them, because we understand, all 5 of us actually that are on the pictures you can see in front of us, and you yourself, is that we all have a different starting point, but we all respect and we honor that starting point, and we're okay with that, you know, but we're making the difference by being on a starting point and acknowledging that. So yeah, please feel free to put us up any questions. Kawe he whakamā. Don't feel shy or embarrassed, because we know what that looks like too. I grew up in Ohope, so, you know, and it was still is a predominantly Pākehā environment. So kind of step back into my taranakitanga in my late 20s, early 30s, and we will understand it's a journey for all of us. And there's no shame in that. That's kei te pai. So that's kind of what we look at around our journey within Ngā Rangatahi Toa. So I guess for the outset, if you're looking at our social media, it can look very Māori, and it is now, but that's not how it always was. And I guess that's what I just want to ensure, that you understand the backstory, and it's been such a journey for us as staff, for our rangatahi, for our governance board, of where we sit now, and as we still continue. And we believe that everything we do, it has to be tika, and that we understand that. So every naming of our project, the name of this panel discussion, Te Hīhiri, the spark of change, that whakapapas back into our rangatahi, because that was their theme for this year, was Te Hīhiri and the spark of change. And it goes through layers of advisors that sit around me, Enon being one of those, and we unpack it and repack it together. And then I do the same with the likes of Tama and our kaimahi, and then I do it with our rangatahi as well. So the naming rights, I guess, sits within a collective mindset of that, and nothing is ever, I don't ever decide to do something on my own, because that would be silly. But also that's the collective nature of how we also all get it right for each other, but also the kaupapa of Ngā Rangatahi Toa, and that my backline that sit behind me keep us safe. And when I talk about safety, I mean more so on a wairua level, on a spiritual level. Even the curation of this panel, you know, we understand of making sure that the 4 of us that are here, or 5 of us, including Tanya, is that we feel safe. And I mean culturally safe, and on a wairua level. So that's what we're about. Tama, I might just lead into you, bro, and you can just kind of go into your. Is that cool?
Yeah, cool as. Well, firstly, I just think I want to say how honoured I am to be on a panel with such esteemed individuals. I feel really, really blessed to be here today. Yeah. Kylie, you are a director and a leader in the arts space, and then also an advocate for diversity. So, yeah, I really acknowledge you for that. Enon, you're a tohunga in your own right, especially of the instruments, and you have a silver scroll. So, tēnā koe. And Huia, yeah, you are a rangatira mō rangatahi. You are a leader for our young people, and also a tuakana for me. So, acknowledgements to you all, and yeah, stoked to be here. And today I kind of come with the perspective of being a Pākehā working in Māori spaces, and I want to share some of my cheat codes that I use to be comfortable in those spaces. Yeah, how do you get comfortable with the uncomfortable? And well, first, I don't think that uncomfortability is ever going to go away. It's always going to be there, but that's a really important thing to acknowledge within Te Ao Māori. It's not the destination. As Huia said, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And you're always going to be on a journey within Te Ao Māori, and your relationship with it as a Pākehā as well. You're always going to be working, and you're never going to just arrive somewhere and then it's all good. You're constantly going to be pushing through, and you will constantly be making mistakes and feeling uncomfortable. Even in my little pepeha that I did at the start, I had a couple of slips. I had a couple of mispronunciations. So I'm more takuhi for those mistakes, but that's all part of it, and it's all good, and you will be making those mistakes as you go on, and it's fine, because sometimes those mistakes help you learn the true meaning of what it is that you are saying. So yeah, and that's what I did want to speak to. My first cheat code was the ko waiaho. Who am I? And I think working in a Māori space, it's really important to know exactly who you are. And we all did it. We all went around and we all said who we are and where we're from. And that's something that happens first, tuatai, a lot of times in Māori spaces, that everyone introduces themselves and say who they are and where they're from. And why this is so important is because not only are you saying where you're from, you're also saying who you're accountable to. So you're giving a group of people that are responsible for you in a way, and that you're saying that you're responsible for them as well. And also the things that you say are opening up avenues for connection. So you're saying things that other people might hear and go, oh, cool, actually, I'm from there, or my parents are from there. So we have some connection. And once we've established connections, then we can move onwards, regardless of what ethnicity you're from or what area of New Zealand you're from. You might be able to find connections that then make you share common bonds, and then you can move forward feeling confident. So you're not feeling as uncomfortable because you're like, oh, I don't know anyone. You've made some small connections, which is why that initial stage is so important. This is whakawhanaungatanga. So this is the way that we establish relationships with the people that we are sharing space with. And in Māori spaces, and especially just as a Pākehā living in New Zealand, why it's so important to know where you're from, who you are, what makes you you. So, and especially, well, I'll use myself as an example. I said that my ancestors are from England, Ireland, and Scotland. So they were settlers that came to New Zealand, and then my dad's family is from Christchurch, and my mum's family is from Whakatane. And in that case, it's like I know that Huia grew up in Whakatane, so there's some connections there. And I said that I live in Auckland as well, and I know that Kylie said that she was living in Auckland, and we actually are all living in Auckland at the moment, this panel anyway. So it's a cool way for us to come together and join. And yeah, in that journey of finding out who you are, that kōwaiaho, searching where you've come from, also looking at these places as well. So it's like I grew up in Whangarei. And what are some of the stories behind Whangarei? Who are the mana whenua? So in Tāmaki Makaurau in Auckland, of course, we acknowledge the mana whenua. We acknowledge Ngāti Whātua and Te Kawerau Maki as well, out in the Waitaks. So we acknowledge these people that hold mana whenua over these lands and what that actually means. What does it mean to have mana whenua status over an area? Because they have a responsibility to uphold the wairua and the mauri of the area. So there's an understanding that these people are actually responsible for us living in that space. So especially like in Tāmaki as well, like Ngāti Whātua, there wouldn't be a city here if it wasn't for Ngāti Whātua. After the treaty was signed, Ngāti Whātua invited Hobson and the boys. They're like, hey, we've actually got this really cool space. Would you want to get out of Kororarika? I hear it's a little bit rough up there. Would you want to get out and come and build a city here? So, Parliament moved to Auckland, and it was set up here. So there wouldn't be a city here. We wouldn't be living in Auckland if it wasn't for the generosity of Māori, if it wasn't for the generosity of Ngāti Whātua. So things like that, like just acknowledging what's the story of the place that you live in, or acknowledging the story of the place that you grew up in as well. They kind of start to form your comprehensive worldview. And especially as an artist, as a practicing artist, you need to understand where you sit in society. You need to understand what it is that means to be you in this society. And when I say sitting in society, I'm meaning understanding, everything that has gone leading to where you are now. That's the kind of the purpose of whakapapa, is that you acknowledge everyone that has come together to create you. Often in a Western mindset, we're always looking forward. We're always like, oh, how do we move to the future? How do we make the future better? And we don't often acknowledge the past, what has happened in the past. And it's a very Māori kind of philosophy to look back. You're always acknowledging everyone that has happened in order for you to be here, and you're using the knowledge of those people that have happened. Sorry, that's quite ironic that I'm pointing to the Tino Rangatira flag, but you're looking backwards, moving forward. So you're using the past to guide the way that you move forward. And understanding that kind of as a concept really helps you understand the way that you interact then with Māori, and it puts precedence on why you should learn your own family history. Where are you from? Yeah, where are your parents from? Where did your parents grow up? Where did their parents grow up? And if the more you know about all that information, even though if it doesn't mean that you might be learning some truths about the past of Aotearoa New Zealand, but those are good things, because the more you know, I think the more power it gives you to stand in your place now. And especially as an artist, especially as a performing artist, you really want to feel confident in how you stand, and understanding all of the things that have happened in the past that have come together in order for you to be where you are now, defines you, and also gives you power to stand and be confident, in who you are. It really helps as an artist to understand the context that you sit within society. But yeah, as I said, it's a journey. We're all going to be at different places on this. We're all going to have different understandings of what it is and what it means, your identity in itself, and you just keep building it. You just keep putting little things in. You keep getting new stories. You might get a photo here, and you might not know who those people are, but that means you might have to ask some of your family members. So you're going to have to reach out and maybe talk to your parents or talk to your aunties and uncles. And that process in itself of talking to your family about the past is whanaungatanga. So this is you establishing relationships and connections and strengthening your understanding of self through your past. And I think that is really important, as a Pākehā in New Zealand, to understand everything that has been before. Because then it's going to start to, once again, build your worldview, and you might understand why there is a little bit of tension. I'd be lying to say that there isn't some tensions with the relationships between Māori and Pākehā, or Māori and Te Tangata Tiriti is probably a better way of looking at it now, because there a lot has gone on, and I'm really stoked that we have this conversation, and I hope we get some questions about some of this past as well, because we are here to talk about it. But I guess that's the ball rolling for now. I'll probably come up with some more ideas as we go, but cheers.
Oh, she's rolling. The ball's rolling, all right. Oh, kia ora, Tama. Hey, I just want to touch on your point, about, and it made me think about even little things like when I go into hui, or and the difference of the starting points of when I introduce myself, and it's always to make a connection, a heart connection, first and foremost with the person, or go, oh, I was brought up there, or I used to work in that industry, first and foremost, rather than, I guess, a focus on the quals. Because when we understand that we have a connection to each other, for me, it's an easier way to build trust of relational practice, because we understand that it's like, oh yeah, I know your cousin or your uncle, and that helps us kind of frame the whakapapa too, of going, oh yeah, I know that whānau mean, so it helps us anchor the kōrero or the conversation, I guess, of what we're going into that hui with. So beautiful. Thank you, Tama, for your whakaaro. Ngā mihi to Dan, who's swapped over with Tanya. Yay, lovely to have you with us. Kia ora. I'm just going to hand it over to Kylie. Kia ora, Kylie.
Kia ora. I guess I wasn't initially stoked to be asked to this panel, to be honest. I was like super uncomfortable. Who was like, hey, do you want to be on this? I was like, no, I really don't. That sounds awful and really uncomfortable. But I think that's it, right? That, if we don't step into these spaces and have these uncomfortable conversations, we're just going to stay in the present. And we sort of, I feel, if we want to move forward, it's about having these robust kind of conversations, which makes us feel really icky in our hearts. There's that nervousness, but I guess stepping forward into this, knowing that Huia and Inon and Tama, that I'm having this conversation alongside you, that the space is held, that the centering in Te Ao Māori, that feels safe for me to step into. So I really thank you both, and all of you actually, for standing alongside me today to make this uncomfortable conversation possible. I've had the privilege of working in the creative sector for my entire career, creative platforms for artists and events. And I think, Huia, both you and what Tama have said about journeying, I think it is that journey. We are all on this journey. And over the time, I've sat at many conversations where we've talked about, representation and these great buzzwords, engagement with Māori, diverse representation. But most of the time, all they've been are conversations, great conversations, really deep conversations, but it's the moving to action. I think in the creative sector, we're really good at having great conversations and deep conversations, and where it gets a bit sticky seems to be about, okay, so what? What's the bit? How do we step forward? What does this look like? That's the bit that we don't talk about so much. We talk about the theory and we talk about the why and we sort of understand. But it feels that there's really a deep, like a paralysis, I guess, about doing the right thing, about not wanting to step forward. And I think, Tama, you talked about this as well, not wanting to make a mistake, and that kind of stops us doing anything, that, trying to work out what exactly the right thing to do is the part that kind of really creates a paralysis, I guess, of action. And that feels like the space that we're in at the moment, which is why I'm so excited about this conversation. It's like, how do we share some of those steps forward that we've taken? How do we share some of those really direct actions that have enabled organizations to move forward, and us to sort of change the spaces that we're working in a really active and intentional kind of way. Here today, I'm within my role at Te Tangata Toa Iwi. We have a Māori name, we're not a kaupapa Māori organisation. The name was gifted to Te Tangata by Sir Hugh Kawharu when the organisation was established in 2001, and it references our aspirations for the creative sector. But I think we here have been on a journey about living up to that name, and what does it mean to hold a Māori name? What are our obligations when we say that? When I say that, hi, I work for Te Tangata Toa Iwi, like that really holds a specific responsibility, which is different from, previous roles where I've said, hey, I work for this organisation. There's a different responsibility when I step forward into spaces. And for us, I know Enan will speak to this probably a bit more about framing what that means for the organisation, but around creating priorities which are Māori-led, that it is not what we think the organisation should do. It is very much Māori-led. We work with Enan Delamere, Chantal Whaiapu, and a whole network of practitioners that are behind them and around them. And so for me, my journey, I guess, has been a deep journey of unlearning, of really learning how to step back, being quiet, being active and listening, and taking those, Tama talked about settling, how do you settle and come together and be in relationship? Because I think often we're so quick to get the work done. We've got a big to-do list and we just want to smash stuff out, and we move into action and we step into that really transactional space of just getting the work done. So over the last few years at Te Tangata, I think, has been that real unlearning of slowing down, stepping back, focusing on relationships, kind of building first, and settling. And I think moving away from engagement with to outcomes and being led by Māori. So I think that sort of, for me, that's been the really key change, is moving, it's a change in language. It's rather than engagement with and representation and seats at the table and all those very great buzzwords that sound good in reports and funding applications, but getting really clear on what are the outcomes for Māori in this work that we're doing. Who is being led? How is this being informed? Who is it being led? I thought I'd just share a couple of examples of some recent work that we've kind of done that we've really intentionally stepped forward into that space. One of the programs at Huia is on a leadership program. And I say leadership, but it's a very different leadership program. It's looking at leadership and it's a program for enablers and activators, I guess, as opposed to leadership. But as we were a lot of the work we do is co-design. So at the beginning phase of that project, we were doing some co-design. We had some awesome people around the room. And one of the challenges was, okay, if we've got 10 wahine in that program, at least 50% of them have to be Māori. So starting from a point with Māori first, as opposed to going, we're going to have 8 women and then we're going to add. It was really reflipping and starting with Māori. And that informed the whole entire kaupapa of the program. It informed who would be facilitating, how our approaches would be. It really changed the frame. And it's something that I think that question about what are the outcomes and who are the audience we're speaking to and who should be in the room right at that beginning phase. Who is designing this and who is it for? So it's really a flip. It's not I think, and the other project was we did some sector engagement, which was around looking at arts and culture within Tāmaki. And one of the priorities there was how do we centre Te Ao Māori? And I think it was a provocation from Enan, which is we would start with Hui with Māori first. We won't go anywhere else. We will start with Hui, with Māori practitioners first, and then we'll build from there. And that really, again, sort of informed the process. It's the starting point, I think, for a lot of our work here. And conscious that then changes the outcome, because you're centering Māori at the beginning. It's not a, hey, there's one seat at the table. It's right at the beginning, and then it flows on from all the work we're doing. And I think, again, that change in language about engagement with to outcomes for seems to be a really kind of key moment in time. I think we're sort of, it seems as a sector, I guess, we're moving away from sort of performative and, you know, things that look great on reports and things that look great on funding applications to really tangible outcomes for Māori, led by Māori, and how, I think the challenge for organisations is how you do that within your organisation. You know, it's clear for Te Taumata, we have Enon, Delamere and Chantal and, you know, the people that we're working with, we're in relationship with, respectful, and they bring their networks with them. But I think the conversation I think would be interesting is how other organisations can start to move towards this and start to move here. So yeah, short kōrero for me today, but I will hand back to you, Huia. Oh, you're on mute, Huia.
Kia ora, thank you. Hey, you didn't miss much anyway. I just want to highlight a couple of the pieces that you talked in there about the starting point being different. And Nanny Ann, or she's a doctor now, Dr. Ann Milne, who talks in her work around the white spaces and thinking of a painting. You know, the canvas starts white. And what she refers to is if we change the colour of that background that represents those that we're working with, then it is a very different starting point. And I think I always think about that around when I'm even bringing in contractors or creatives are going, what are we trying to create here? If we go to your organisation and do that, and something that was gifted to me by Kat Ruka from Basement Theatre and what their whānau discussions have been having around, and when I say whānau, I mean the staff, around chocolate chip cookies and peanut brownies, and referring to if I take my kids to I guess a mainstream Pākehā audience or, you know, contractors, then we've got chocolate chip cookies. But if those contractors come to work for us, then we've got peanut brownies. And it's understanding how everyone contributes to the whole for the betterment of for us, our young people, which is always around Māori and Pacifica, and understand of what we're doing to ensure that we always hold and create that safe space for them. So it's something that I'm always really conscious of about when I'm engaging with organisations and when I'm collaborating, of going, who's going to hold power, or will we be sharing power, and what that power sharing looks like. Which I think is a nice way to, I'm just going to lead into Enon now to be able to kōrero more around his whakaaro and his thoughts around that. So kia ora, Enon.
Kia ora, tēnā tātou. Yeah, lovely to listen to everyone. You know, Tama talked about journey, and he talked about us never walking alone. And sort of reminds me of a whakatauki that says, e hoki au, a ki o maunga ki awa ke pure ai, koe I ngā hauaro o tāwhiri mātea. Basically, it means return to your mountains and your rivers, that you may be cleansed by the healing winds of tāwhiri mātea. But if we strip that back a little bit further, it actually means that you've got to start this journey when you're comfortable with yourself. And if you're not comfortable with yourself, you can't start the journey. And those are those, I guess, courageous conversations or brave conversations that we have to have with ourselves about the why first. Why do we want to go on this journey? And what is the key driver? And you can't go on that journey until you actually, you're one with yourself. And like Tama said, never walk alone. And so when we, at the marae, when we greet you, we don't greet you, we greet all your ancestors before you. So we greet the whole lot that come into the space. Kylie talked a little bit about, you know, the doing. That's the hardest part And as we know, pretty good at talking up a good game, but delivering, the All Blacks were like that on Saturday, but delivering, that's a little bit difficult. But again, in my mind anyway, it boils back to the why. And I'll just use a little example. Te taumata toia iwi wanted a te tiriti statement for them to go forward. And so my response to them was, why? You're not the treaty partner. The treaty partner is not everyday New Zealand. The treaty partner is the Crown. Now, if you want a commitment to Māori, well, that's another story. We can have a different conversation, and that's a different journey. So, just coming to terms with the why, I think, in my mind, is key. The brave conversation is actually the why. The why, are we doing it to tick the box? It's the flavour of the month. Or is it genuine, authentic desire to support kaupapa Māori going forward? So, to me, I guess, the conversation, the first conversation to have is the why. The how you get there, there's plenty of people that can support you in that. All these people online here can support you in getting there, but it's actually the why. That's the conversation that we really need to have. I guess a couple of other things while I'm hogging the mic, while I've got the floor. Never be afraid to ask, and never be afraid to ask the why. And because when we were growing up, we never asked the why. We weren't allowed to. And so in Mātauranga Māori, you will see there's a rejuvenation of Mātauranga Māori, and the easy example is Matariki. Matariki now is a holiday, as we all know, and quite happy about that, to be honest. But it comes from a knowledge base that was lost to many people. And so for those of us who started sort of celebrating Matariki, in the early 80s and the 90s, there was only 7 stars. Now there's 9 stars. So it's evolved. And it's evolved because our knowledge has evolved. And that's because we never asked the why when we were younger. So we've got everyone there's a new sexy and fancy thing out there called the maramataka, which is basically living by the lunar calendar. When I was at home, it didn't matter whether it was a low energy day. If you had to weed the garden, you had to weed the garden. You didn't wait on the side of the road till it was a high energy day and then went out and weed the garden. You actually just went out and did it because that's what you had to do. So, some of our mātauranga is morphing and we're learning more and more about it. So never ever be afraid to ask the why. And there's a lot of us that can't actually tell you the why, just that we know that that's the right thing to do. I never knew the lunar days. All I knew is when the Kraua said, it's 3 days before the full moon, we're going out fishing. We went out fishing. Didn't know the name of the day, but I didn't ask the why. So it's really important that you ask the why. Just wonder, I guess, one of the other things that I think everyone on the line talked about is that e hara taku toa te toa takitahi. So when we achieve, it's never just us achieving, it's actually everybody achieving. So if we start to begin to have this conversation and begin to have this journey around, I guess, mātauranga Māori and infusing Māori outcomes into your kaupapa, it's actually not you, it's all of us. And so it's Aotearoa ultimately that reaps the rewards for having this conversation. Well, no, I'll leave it there for now. Otherwise, I'll keep on talking and might carry on for a long time. So, kia ora tātou.
Oh, kia ora, Enon. I just want to touch on your point about the why. I know for us, man, the why for me is because I don't want to get a crack by my nannies. of this life and past, and so I'm kind of real clear of I will get a crack, and I think about that of when we're talking about our levels of accountability, and for me the accountability and this comes into the competitive funding model space as well, around who is our accountability back to. For us, it is centered within our whānau. An example of that was we rolled out our theatre shows for Mana Order in June, and one of our babies, she was dropped through some of the rehearsals, and when she was dropped kind of on her head and shoulders, and one, it's an Osher shoe for us. Yep, first and foremost. For me, the bigger concern was I now have to front to that nanny to say that I didn't look after her mokopuna. And so for me, that was a bigger level of accountability of how I'm now having to have this conversation as the boss, and it was a real hard conversation to have with that particular whānau, because we made statements that we're there to work with some of the most vulnerable young people and families, and for me that's a really big responsibility, and it's something I take really seriously. And the accountability is back to the whānau, regardless of who they are or where they live, and looking them in the face and going, today, Whaia, I didn't quite look after one of your mokopuna, and owning that stuff. And yeah, she was waiting. But that's the level of accountability of our why, of why we do what we do, and conversations we have with other people as well. What I'm going to do now is, I guess for all of us here, between the four of us, is there anything that's kind of come up that you might want to ask one of the other panelists that's kind of been burning there of going, but I want to know this, before I ask some questions of you guys? Nah? Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, I've got a question, I suppose. Yeah. I would ask, is like, why is an understanding of Te Tiriti o Waitangi important?
What was that last part, Tama?
Why is an understanding of Te Tiriti o Waitangi? Why is an understanding of the Te Tiriti o Waitangi important in being a New Zealander?
Who are you asking that to? To anyone? Or?
Maybe Inon. Yeah, Inon was talking about the treaty. Yeah.
I guess there's several ways to answer that question. I guess the first way is, in my mind anyhow, that it's our founding document. It's the document that sort of joined two worlds together. So to understand it, in my mind at least, is a good way forward of actually putting some of that stuff into action. And like I said, I believe the document it's between the government or the Crown at that stage and Māori and all other citizens, actually, if you read the treaty itself. And even understanding the two different versions and the why, there's a whole lot of history there that thankfully schools are going to start learning, previously not really. But that's one way of answering it. The other way, what I would say is, being Māori, people automatically think what's in the Te Tiriti and the treaty, and that you can answer all the questions. Actually, it wasn't that, well, it was long ago because I got grey hair, but I was well into my 30s before I fully understood, which was only last month. I fully understood what I guess Te Tiriti and the treaty actually mean to our nation. And so, it's a little bit of a fallacy. And I don't know if when I used to go to job interviews, they go, oh, we'll skip over the treaty question. And I was thankful because I couldn't probably answer it in those early days. I think it's really important. And I don't know how many people out there actually know the two versions. And for a lot of Māori in particular, they've narrowed it down to these principles, but actually it's more than the principles. The principles are something you can pluck out and you can say, oh, it's about protection. But if you follow the words, it's actually the words behind that protection principle that Māori really have have the wairua too, and the hononga too, and really want those put into action rather than the principle. So, well, that's my take on it. Well, no.
Thank you for that.
I think too, when I think about, because, for me, it's I'll only work around te tiriti o Waitangi, and that's referring to, because it's the 4 articles, but 2 in particular, and that's around tino rangatiratanga, so the rangatiratanga, which for me is the self-determination of the person. And if you were to look at, like for us, we look at the Youth Development Strat Aotearoa as one of our other guiding documents. In there, it talks about the self-determination of young people, and that the young person it's up to them to determine the pace of the relationship, kind of what arts things we're rolling out, that stuff, and also wairuatanga, because for me, I see that it lacks in a lot of programs, a lot of youth development programs, of going, but how are you looking and how are you safeguarding the wairua of our rangatahi through that stuff, which is, in Tama, it's probably so innate in the work that you do with us. But had you need to articulate it, those are the 2 biggest articles that we work to. Hey, we've just got a couple of questions. I'm getting a lot. We got questions coming through. So how do you think get current Pākehā arts leadership to pass the mic so we can all become peanut brownies? Yay, peanut brownies. Does anyone want to answer that?
Yep. Actually, I'll just answer this one and I won't answer any more because I'm starting to... I love this kaupapa, so I could talk about it for ages. Look, in how I see it is it's about a power balance. So it's about not actually changing Pākehā arts leaderships. It's actually saying on our board we're going to have 50-50. Then we've got the thinking around the table from a flax roots level. So it's remaking the mix of leadership and making sure that that Māori, that Pacific Island, whatever you like, are in the mix right from the start. And as we know, in the book written by Pauline Kingi, the fish rots from the head first. So it's actually the board that actually drives the change. It might be an individual within the organisation, but if the board doesn't drive it, it won't happen. So it's really important that we get the balance of all these leadership boards and let's be real, in arts organisations, it's all for love. Very rarely do you get paid to sit on these things, and so you're giving your time, but you're giving your time from your worldview. And it's trying to change that worldview by changing the power shift and the balance. Okay,
Kia ora.
now I have a bit of a rest.
Kylie, I'm going to ask this one of you. It's a 2-part question. I'm going to ask it the other way around, actually. What do you have to say to leaders who are not at one with themselves and trying to lead this kaupapa?
Oh, it's a good one. Don't lead this kaupapa, I guess. I think, it would be to what, referencing Tama's kōrero, right? Really understanding who you are and where you come from and your place of being here in Aotearoa, and to Enon's kōrero, your why, right? So I think understanding those things first and understanding who needs to be with you to lead that kaupapa. It might be, but this idea of leading by stepping out of the way and leading from behind and enabling others to step forward. I think if we move away from this idea of leadership as being quite, the only word coming to mind was psychopathic, but I don't think it is, but as in, leading from I'm at the front and we're going to go through with all else, we're going to get to the end regardless. I think it requires a different kind of leadership. I think it requires a leadership which is enabling and has other qualities, empathetic leadership, which isn't the leadership as a whole that's prioritized across the world, I think. We tend to prioritize different kinds of leadership, but I think it's a question about leadership as a whole, I would say.
Ka pai. That was actually the second part, what type of leadership. There's another question that's come in is, there are too many people that mean well and want to do good but can't let go of their ways of learning. What would you say to them? I'm going to answer this, and feel free to jump into this as well, is they're going to have to be let go or they're going to be checked. Because I think what's happening in Aotearoa and within the creative arts is these massive shifts going on. And I sat with funders the other day that and big funders that are like, we're starting to see a shift that's needed to happen because we see that the outcomes aren't there for Māori and Pacifica and young people in the arts. And so they're starting to notice it. But I think too, because of the shift of how everything's moving, not only within the arts sector, is, Pākehā that are working in this way, iwi takitake is, that's, like, hey, you and Kylie and Tama, you checking your own, to be like, that's not necessarily our job as Māori, because then me and Enon look like hardcore activists of like, oh, here they go again. But when you're having a conversation with your own, man, that looks real different. And that's what will start to be getting called out. And, we move in an age of cancel culture, of social media, and same with us. We'll align to people and form partnerships of, whether they're Pākehā organisations or iwi takitaki, that is just has a solid values kind of tikanga and kaua of how they work, and in a meaningful way. And that's what's really important to the mahi. So, yeah, I think if they don't do it, they're going to get checked, man. It's changing, eh? The face. Would you agree, Kylie, Enon? Because you guys are both in that kind of space of strategy and leadership of what you're seeing come through.
I think your point about, Pākehā need to be the people speaking up, I think that is a really kind of key position. I think it's understanding how you can use the power that you have to make space for others. And again, not relying on Māori to be the ones who are stepping up and checking all the time. How do we check the organisations or the room, and whatever that looks like? How do we step up at the tables we're at and the rooms that we're in to say, hey, this doesn't feel good, or hey, we should do something different? It's whatever spaces you're in and whatever change you can make. I think all those small changes lead to a bigger change. And I think we want to value those small changes and those small moves as well as the big steps.
Ka pai. Hey, we've got about 5 minutes left just to going on.
I think the other thing for me, and just in terms of that that question, is what you've got to do as a leader is surround yourself with better people, and then you really know. We've got the word called rangatira. Now, ranga is collect. It's a collection of. So what you got to do is collect the right people around you, and I guess in some respects, trust in your mātauranga. You know what you're good at, but if you don't know and there's a gap, get someone that can help you. Don't just fake it till you make it, because when Huia talked about having to go in front of the nannies and the poor tamariki falling over, that's the physical, what I call the jandal. You get the jandal, but then there's a spiritual thing as well. Another level that you need to make sure that you're protected as well. So, it's that whole a person approach, the hinengaro, the wairu, and the tinana, and it's the same as an organisation, that you have to get those things right as well. So, kia ora.
Kia ora. Hey, I'm mindful I've got about 4 minutes left, and I guess I just want to kind of wrap up to make sure that we're good for time for our for the rest of our conference, and just want to say we hope that you guys have gone away with something, whether it's kai of peanut brownies and chocolate chip cookies, and about the power sharing of what we all do with each other, but also that's just the microcosm of the mahi that we do, and that the mahi starts with you internally, and you having some real clear conversations with yourself first and foremost, before you try and change the world, and like Enon said, align your soldiers, man, align your people, align your backline, and it's a collective mindset of how we do this and how we do, like we done this conference. So it's not just me, I'm just the facilitator, but it's how we do it together and how we come out of this and journey through it safely together, which is, is what we do. The core of that is because we value relationships and we value each other. We value each other both professionally and personally and what it adds to our life, but also to our mahi and to the sector. And it's something we don't want to lose. We don't want people to leave the sector, and we understand what the commitment takes and the responsibility to look after that. Understanding too, there's an unlearning that has to happen. It can be referred to as a decolonisation or a rethinking or unlearning, whatever the word you're comfortable with. But yeah, know your pedagogy, man. Know yourself, and that's okay. And be vulnerable to have to relearn some of the things you might think well in Te Ao Pākehā, which looks really different in Te Ao Māori. Enon, just quickly, can I hand it over to you, bro? You got about 2 minutes. Sorry, I can't answer this last question, but I might come into the chat and answer that if that's cool. But Enon, if you can just kind of wrap us up, bro, with any final things, and then we'll hand it over. Kia ora.
Sure. Tēnā koe, Huia. Look, I wanted to touch on people are afraid to make the first step. And I guess one of the big things at the moment that's and you hear it on the news is about the 3 waters, and the councils don't want to power share. That's what it is. That everything else bar the power share they're happy with. And that's the knuckle, or that's the crux of our conversation, is about the balance of power. So yeah, I want to leave us with a whakatauki that was said by Tā Hemi Henare, and it goes, "O tāwhiti ke te haerenga ki te kore e haere tonu. He nui rawa o mahi kia kore e mahi tonu." Loosely translated is, we've come too far not to go further, and we've done too much work not to do more. And I guess the challenge that I would like to leave, kia takoto nei te kōrero kia koutou, challenge that I'd like to leave with you is that you've already done a whole heap of work, and now you've just got to do some more. And we're all in that same boat, and we're all on a different journey. Hoia no, ka kapi nei tō tātou wehinga me te te atu o nā karakia. So just going to close us off. We started with a karakia, we ended with a karakia. And I guess those are those little things, kua mahia tō tātou tikanga, that we practice our own ways of doing things. And whether you believe in God or the atua or other gods, or it doesn't matter, because we're praying for to a supreme being that will watch over us and guide us as we go. Hoi anō, waere ki uta, waere ki tai, waere ki tēnei tō tātou kaupapa, whare ki nei mo mātou I tēnei wa. Piki te ora, piki te kaha, piki te arohatanga ki runga ki tēnā ki tēnā o tātou. Ko tau te mana ki tanga ki runga ki tātou e runga I te purangi, I runga I tēnei tō tātou kaupapa e hora nei tēnei wā. E te atua, anā nei te tuku inoi, te tuku whakamoimiti ki a koe. Haumi e, hui e, tāiki.
Kia ora te whānau.